So despite all the tough talk, a solution to the Greek debt crisis remains now elusive. What's it going to take to break the deadlock? And can Greece and the markets wait that long? Well, Laurence Mutkin is a managing director at Morgan Stanley. He joins me now for the bank's London offices. Laurence, thank you so much for being on the show today. Now, in terms of what we were expecting yesterday, I guess a lot of investors were hoping some kind of agreement, or at least the finance ministers to say we're working together on this to find an agreement. We didn't get anything. Why are the disagreements so strong?
Yeah, hi, Francine. It is a very tense time, isn't it? And I think I'm afraid this is what you have to expect in these time of these very difficult negotiations, both within the country and between finance ministers. As we get closer and closer to the date by which things need to be resolved, the negotiating positions obviously have to come closer together. But I don't think one should expect in these difficult negotiations that you reach the place you need to be much ahead of time. That's not how things work, because people have to make difficult decisions.
Sure, but Laurence, you know, the more you wait, I guess the more then you have to pay in the long term, because the more you wait, the more these yields on Greek bonds go up.
I think that is a sad but inevitable fact. I think it does tend to be that way. I mean, our base case is an agreement is reached. The European finance ministers and the Greek government get to the place that they need to get to allow the money to flow again. But we see this volatility, and this volatility is part of the problem. It's sort of an inevitable part of the process, and as you say, is damaging for pricing.
Well, I guess what I don't really have a clear picture of is if Greece defaults, what happens the day afterwards?
Well, I think nobody has a clear picture of that, but nobody thinks it's going to be easy, either internally or in the broader European context. And I think ultimately that is why an agreement will have to be reached.
Will the ECB budge at all? Because at the moment there's a really stark opposition to any kind of reprofiling or restructuring which isn't 100% voluntary. Something which actually seems to be completely against what the Germans want.
Completely is a big word, right? I think it's not against the ideal of some people in the German parliament in particular. But of course, a voluntary reprofiling of some nature would in a way solve the problem for a lot of people if it looked right. But as we know, that only happens because in a way the ECB remains adamant for as long as possible. But I think there was a little piece of news out in terms of the German finance ministry not wanting to go against anything that the ECB would like. I think there's obviously that kind of movement on both sides of the story to some extent.
Yeah. Is it difficult to understand really the German position at the moment? We heard those comments from Mr. Weidmann just 5 days ago saying, well, look, the euro is going to remain stable regardless of what happens to Greece.
I'm afraid it's easy to understand everybody's position, but it doesn't mean the positions are compatible. Likewise, it's not that hard to understand the opposition internally in the country in Greece, but it's one thing to understand it, and it's another thing to understand what's necessary for the ongoing successful financing of the Greek state.
Now, it's been a year and a half, that we've been trying to deal with Greece. How much of a risk of contagion is from now on? Are we going to have the same problem with Portugal and Ireland a year, 2 years down the line from now?
Hopefully not. A lot depends, I guess, on the global growth outlook. I think it's fair to say that strong growth globally and strong growth within Europe makes the fiscal pressures on all countries, but especially the stressed countries in the periphery, easier. Certainly a worser global growth outlook would make life much harder in these places. But again, there's not an inevitability to that yet, no.
I know it's a difficult question, but when do you think that we'll actually get some kind of European resolution, or at least having some kind of common voice between the finance ministers and the ECB? Are we going to wait a month, 2 months? Are we going to get it next Sunday after they meet again in Brussels?
They've all been difficult questions, actually, Francine. I think it looks like we've pushed things 2 to 3 weeks ahead. Sometime in mid-July is my guess. But as you say, there's another meeting at the weekend which may produce something that we need by then.
And in terms of, you still have hope that actually we can get through this in a relatively a good way? Because, as you say, we are, 16 countries and with very different political views also.
Yeah. Why are we likely to get through in a good way? It's because, obviously, it's in no one's interest to have a disorderly and bad result. And it seems to me at this stage, there's enough room still for a meeting of minds somewhere to enable us to continue.
Yeah, it'll be painful, but we'll get there in the end. All right, let's hope. Laurence, thank you so much. Laurence Mutkin.